This is a Perspex table that I've just made, and it's been cut out into an arch shape obviously, and I've just put it together with a bit of threaded bar and some chrome tubing. To make a table like this it takes about 8 hours, so it is very time consuming, but if you had to buy one of these in the shops I'm pretty sure it'd be very expensive and you'd be looking at a few £100. So we've got a piece of Perspex here that's approximately 2 foot square, and it's also 12mm thick, double-sided frost, and the colour is 4T56, and these make really nice tables for your living room. But I'm actually struggling getting the correct size pieces at the minute, so these are just the last 2 pieces I've got left, and it's a little bit small at this side. So I've not even bothered cutting that last line there to make it square. So the idea is to draw an arch shape on this side and then transfer it onto that side. That piece there is 12 inches by 2 foot, and that's a similar size, apart from it's a little bit short there at the end. We're just missing a little bit. So what I'm going to do is start drawing the arch at this point. So the arch will start there and go up to that line, and then it'll curve round and go into the middle. And believe me, I'm no expert at drawing freehand. So this is where a piece of flexible plastic comes in. This is a piece of plastic window trim, hence it's brown on one side, white on the other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off up there and then bend that round to there to give me the arch shape, and then I'm just going to draw that in with a permanent marker. So with the help of the clamps I'm now bending this plastic, and I've got something that resembles an arch shape, so I'm just going to draw around it. So I've now got that piece where I want it, so I'm just going to draw around it. So we've now got half an arch, so I'll get the jigsaw and I'll cut straight up there and right round in one go to there, and then I'll cut down that line, and then I'll turn that piece over onto there and draw another line, so we've got a perfectly symmetrical arch shape. So for this bit I'm going to be using a jigsaw with a metal cutting blade in, and it's important that you get a good quality blade when you're doing this. And also I've got a pair of safety glasses on. So when you're cutting Perspex it's important that you don't have orbital action on, because you just want the blade to go straight up and down. So we've got that in the 0 position, so that's off. And also on the opposite side we've got it blowing air on, which will blow some of the swarf away from the blade at the front as it's cutting. And we've also got the shoe on the jigsaw, which will prevent it from scratching the Perspex, although we have still got the masking on at the minute. So all I've done now is taken my offcut piece from that side and turned it over onto this side. And now all I need to do is draw around this. And now we know that we've got a perfectly symmetrical art. So now all I need to do is cut this side out. So there we have the basic art shape that we're going to use for the table. So all I need to do now is put this on top of the other piece of Perspex and trace around it, and then cut that out so that we've got two identical pieces. I've now used this art shape as a pattern and I've traced around it onto the other piece of Perspex, which I'm now going to cut out using the jigsaw. I've now taped the two pieces together using some masking tape, which is low tack masking tape. So I should be able to pull that off quite easily without it taking the actual masking off the Perspex. And I've done this because I want to drill through both pieces at once. Now the problem is we're going straight through one piece, but we're not going all the way through the other piece. So for that reason I'm now working on the back side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark the drill holes on this side, and then I'm going to drill completely through the first piece, and I'm just going to spot into the second piece where we need our holes drilling. So I'm going to go about 4 inches in from there. So that's the centre of that. And then using the square, I'll just go up there about 4 inches again. So now I've got a mark there, a mark there, and a mark there, and they're going to be my holes where I'm going to actually drill. So this is a scrap piece of Perspex. I'm just going to pull down the drill just to make sure that it doesn't go all the way through the bottom piece. And you can see there that it just goes in by a couple of millimetres, which is what we want. So now I'm going to drill these 3 holes using the pilot drill. So now we've spotted through there with the pilot drill, we can now remove the tape. Now this piece that I've got in my hand is going to be the bottom piece, so we can drill straight through this now using the 8mm drill bit, which will give us our clearance holes. So this is going to be the bottom of the table, so I'm now going to drill straight through this using the 8mm clearance bit. And it's important when you go through this that you do it slowly. If you try and do it too quickly, you'll just break the Perspex. So now we've got 3 8mm holes drilled in the bottom piece. So using the depth stop on the pillar drill, I've adjusted it so that there's about 3mm between the bottom of the drill there and the end of the Perspex. So that means that it's impossible for that drill to go through the Perspex now. So we're going to drill this hole, which is a 6.8mm hole, and then we're going to tap it out using an 8mm tap. So this is going to be the top of the table, and this particular side that we're drilling is the back. So we're just going to align this up now. And then we're going to drill the holes. Once we've drilled the holes, we will then tap it. So now we just need to tap the 3 holes out using an M8 tap. And if you don't know how to do this, I have done a video on how to tap acrylic, and I'll put the link into that at the end. But for now I'm just going to tap these 3 holes. So I'm now holding the Perspex in the workmate, and I've put a couple of pieces of cardboard just around there just to protect the actual Perspex, then we're not damaging it. So now we've got a rough edge on here where we cut it with the jigsaw. So we need to remove all those saw marks using some 60 grade aluminium oxide paper. When we've done that, we'll then swap to 120 grade aluminium oxide paper, and then 600 grade wet and dry paper, then 1200 grade wet and dry paper, and then we'll polish it with rubbing compound. And then finally we'll polish it with metal polish. You can use a sander for doing this, but it's just as easy using a sanding block like this. To get in the hard to reach bit there, I'm just using a piece of abrasive paper just on its own. Now I'm swapping to the 120 grade aluminium oxide paper. So now we're going to switch to the 600 grade wet and dry paper. So we're going to actually wet this before we use it in some clean water. Now I'm switching to the 1200 grade wet and dry paper. I'm just going to wet it in some clean water and then continue sanding. Now I'm going to polish the edge using some rubbing compound. The final stage is to polish it using some silver polish, which I am applying using a clean rag. I prefer to use this autosol because it seems to work really well on Perspex. This piece is now finished, and that's the kind of finish that you'd expect to get on the edge. So now I've got one more of these to polish up like that, and then we can start to construct the table. Now we're going to start making the legs for the table, and they are made up from some M8 threaded bar and some 19mm chrome plated tube. I'm going to start by cutting this M8 threaded bar into 16.5 inch lengths, and these will make up the legs for the table. I've marked where it needs cutting with a permanent marker, and then I'm just going to screw a couple of nuts down the threaded bar. So that's the mark where I want it cutting, and I've put a nut at each side because that'll make it easier when we come to repair the thread after we've cut it. So we'll just grip that in the workmate, and then we're just going to cut through it using an hacksaw. So you can see that when you've cut through the threaded bar, the actual end bit is damaged. So that's why I always place a nut on first. As I wind that out there now, it's now repairing the thread, which will mean that that'll screw into the top of the table really easily. But it does have a few burrs on there, so I'm just going to clean it up with a file first. And you can see that the threaded bar goes through the nut with no problems at all there. So that will screw into the top of the table now with no problems at all. So we've now got 3 pieces of threaded bar, and they're all exactly the same length at 16.5 inches. Now we're going to cut the chrome tube into 15-inch lengths. So we've now aligned the tube cutter with the line that we've just marked on there. So now all we need to do is cut it. So in order to use one of these, all you do is turn it around the tube, and at the same time tighten up the handle on the tube cutter. So we'll do one full revolution and then tighten, and then another revolution and then tighten a bit more, and just keep repeating that process until you go all the way through it. you're then left with a nice neat cut like that on the end, and it's also perfectly straight, but there is a chance that there'll be burrs on the inside, so we just remove them using a burr removal tool. So we've now got 3 pieces of chrome tube for the legs, which are all exactly the same length. We're now going to start assembling the table. So firstly you need to start off with the top, which is the one with the holes that don't go all the way through it. It'll just have the holes on the back. They're the ones that we tapped earlier. So if we just lie it down flat, we can then remove the masking. And if the edges look a bit white, it's only the metal polish, and we'll clean that off after. Now I've placed a nut on the threaded bar and wound it down a little, and now I'm going to apply some super glue to the end of the bar, and then I'm going to screw the threaded bar into the holes that we tapped earlier. Once this table is made, you won't be able to take it apart again because these will be super glued in. If you did want to keep taking it apart and putting it back together again, you can put thread inserts in the holes. But as this table's just going to be a permanent fixed table, I'm going to put some super glue on the end there and super glue these in. And you only need a very small amount. And then we're just going to tighten that up. And that is quite tight now. So they're all now in the correct holes and they're all nice and sturdy. But what we're going to do now is use these as lock nuts, and we're just going to tighten that up against the surface of the Perspex. And we'll just nip those up a little bit using a spanner. And you don't want to go mad when you're doing this. It's only a quarter of a turn that you need to give them. The next step is to get some insulation tape and wrap it around the nuts. This is really just to stop the chrome tubes from rattling against the threaded bar. Now you can take your chrome tube that we cut earlier and slide that over the studs. Now we're just going to place a mark at the top of each stud with a permanent marker. And then we can remove the tubes again. Now we can put an M8 nut on and wind it down just below the actual mark that we just made. We can now use some more insulation tape to hold that nut in place to stop it moving. So we'll just put a bit below it. So now when we push the tubes on, the insulation tape should help to grip the tube. So now the table top is assembled and we've got the legs on. So now all we need to do is get the bottom of the table. So we now need to remove the masking. Now you've removed the masking, you can then place this on top of the legs, making sure that you thread the threaded bar through the holes. And then to lock the whole thing in place, I'm going to use two M8 stainless steel nuts, followed by a M8 dome nut. So I can put the first one on, and then nip it up. And you don't need to go mad when doing this. And then you can put the second nut on. And then you can lock that up against the first nut. And then you can put the dome nut on. Which is giving you a nice stainless steel foot. So I'll just give it a wipe with a dry cloth to remove all the excess metal polish. And then we can turn the table the correct way up. And then finally you just need to remove the top piece of masking. And then again, if you take a clean cloth, you can just clean the metal polish off from the edge. So that's how to make an arch shape Perspex table.